China's Belt and Road Initiative is gaining attention. What are Xi Jinping's true objectives?
I think that Xi Jinping wants to tie the world to China.
Despite Xi's ambition, the BRI is meeting challenges.
The reason is because Chinese government's asking price is too high. Sometimes they are demanding 90% of the profit.
Most important of all, will it shift the power center from the US to China?
Welcome to Zooming In. I'm Simone Gao. At the Japanese CPEC meeting last year, Steve Bannon said the US media and the West in general have willfully ignored clear signs China plans to take over the global economy on authoritarian terms. And he said, it's more than a warning to the West. He was talking about China's Belt and Road Initiative. Despite Xi Jinping's ambition, what is really going on with this project? No nation in recent history has ever been successful in dominating both land and sea at the same time. Can China do it? And will it be able to shift the world power center from the US to China? In this episode of Zooming In, we'll explore these questions and more.
Chinese President Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, in late 2013. China claims they're establishing a modern-day Silk Road. It is reminiscent of the historical Silk Road that brought tremendous economic success to the Han and Tang dynasties. The initiative aims to cover a path that stretches across China, Central and Eastern Europe, and Africa, targeting over 64 countries. China claims that BRI does not have an agenda to fix China's own industry overcapacity issues, but rather to boost the economic and investment growth through building infrastructure projects in some of the less developed nations. But an April 18, 2018, Washington-based Center for Advanced Defense Studies, C4ADS, report suggests something different. It claimed that the vast buildup of military forces in project locations appear to generate political influence, stealthily expands China's military presence, and create an advantageous strategic environment. On April 17, 2018, German press Handelsblatt Global reported that 27 of the 28 national EU ambassadors to Beijing have compiled a report that sharply criticizes China's Silk Road project, denouncing it as designed to hamper free trade and put Chinese companies at an advantage. Despite China's grand ambition, BRI is clearly facing difficulties. On April 15, 2018, the South China Morning Post reported that the ambitious Chinese Belt and Road project is already running into financial trouble in Africa. Li Ruogu, the former president of Export-Import Bank of China, recently said that the countries involved simply don't have the money to pay for it. Many countries already are deep in debt. CNBC reported that Wang Yiming, deputy head of the Development Research Center of China's State Council, said that although many projects were funded by major financial institutions, there was still a huge funding gap of up to $500 billion a year.
In spite of the financial risks, China pushes forward. Does it want to achieve goals besides economic expansion? Let's hear my discussion with Daily Beast columnist Gordon Chang and senior political commentator Chen Pokong. What do you think Xi Jinping really wants to achieve with the Belt and Road Initiative?
I think that Xi Jinping wants to tie the world to China. The Belt and Road initiatives were essentially intended to connect the great cities of China's East Coast to the European markets. But the concept has really expanded because now they talk about a polar Silk Road, a Latin America Silk Road. So essentially, this whole idea of Belt and Road has gone global.
If this is really a manifestation of Xi Jinping's global ambition, it makes strategic sense. China can most easily expand its sphere of influence from the Western Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. Why? because the whole Pacific Rim is dominated by America. Together with Canada, Japan, and Australia, it will be very hard for China to compete with them head-to-head. However, it's a different situation if this route extends from Central Asia to Eastern Europe. By sea, it's from the South Pacific Ocean to the Indian Ocean, and then from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. American influence is relatively weak in this region. But as I said before, there has never been a nation in recent history that could dominate both land and sea simultaneously, let alone the financial risks this project poses to China. So, even if the Belt and Road Initiative makes strategic sense, is it viable? If China is not quite ready for it, why the rush? Let's hear from Chen Po-kong. Why is China in such a rush to push forward an effort that has so many financial risks?
Xi Jinping and the Chinese government do believe they have an economic urgency to rush to push forward their Belt and Road Initiative because they are eager to shift the surplus production in order to transfer the crisis and risk of Chinese economic recession. As the world's largest exporter, China now is facing domestic imbalances and industrial overcapacity. Especially, China's domestic growth slows and the demographic dividends is disappearing. Xi Jinping and the Chinese government also believe the Belt and Road Initiative can help them to promote Chinese GDP growth, which they think is essential to the security of the regime. As I said before, Chinese government always put their regime's safety as the topest issue.
Coming up, what has the Belt and Road Initiative accomplished so far? And what is the response from Western nations? The Belt and Road Initiative is set to be completed in the mid-21st century. It's still in its early phases. From a Western perspective, BRI plans are extremely vague. Finding a list of projects that have been completed in the past 5 years is difficult. During last year's Belt and Road Forum, China listed 270 concrete results. They were mostly signed documents. Another Chinese governmental source said about 50 state-owned enterprises have invested or participated in almost 1,700 projects. In January 2018, the International Finance Forum, in collaboration with central banking, conducted a Belt and Road survey of central banks from more than 25 countries and regions. And this is some of the things they found.
Just under half of the central banks described the Belt and Road as a once-in-a-generation initiative. Nearly three-quarters of those surveyed said, however, that they didn't think that it had resulted in greater investment from China than was already expected. But as I said, 92% of respondents felt that it would boost their domestic GDP during the next 5 years. In terms of geopolitics, the BRI is expected to create, from the central bank respondents, the greatest friction with the EU and the US, 42% and 33% respectively.
Despite the tension with the EU and the US, the Belt and Road project has enhanced China's global image. It's developing political, economic, and industrial ties with 2/3 of the globe. It's increased Chinese influence in a key region of the world. This makes some worry. These geopolitical shifts have revitalized the quadrilateral security dialogue. It was first established in 2007 between India, Japan, Australia, and the United States. China's increasing assertiveness in the South China Sea and expanding maritime strategy spurred the realignment. The four countries have slightly different perceptions about China's threat, but there are some key issues they all agree on: freedom of navigation, maritime security, and respect for international law. The United States in particular is trying to counteract Chinese influence since it withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP.
Our guest, Gordon Chang, does not believe the Belt and Road Initiative is economically viable. Here's my discussion with him. What is your comment on the first 5 years of the Belt and Road Initiative? Has it been successful?
Belt and Road initiatives have been successful in the sense of creating a lot of hype, a lot of excitement. But when we start to look at the reality of it, they have not really fulfilled promise. You know, we had this month a former head of the Chinese Export-Import Bank say that a lot of the Central Asian countries along the Belt and Road are not able to meet their financial commitments. And part of this is the Belt and Road is just not economically viable. When I was practicing law in Hong Kong in the 1980s, I didn't do finance work or infrastructure work, but I know that my firm did, and everything that could be financed was financed by the market, and that's continued to be true. What the Belt and Road attempts to do is to finance stuff that the market wouldn't touch, which means that essentially China wants countries to pay to accomplish Chinese foreign policy goals. This might work in the short term, but I don't think it's going to work long term. What we have right now is a lot of excitement, but really when you look at the problems facing Belt and Road, something which is not economically viable, which is maybe strategically important for China, but not important for other countries, I don't think it's going to work out in the long term.
Do you think the West should worry about the Belt and Road Initiative?
There are a lot of things to worry about China. Belt and Road is pretty low on the list of things we've got to be concerned about. If the Chinese want to spend money on a railroad in Central Asia, that's fine in a sense because every dollar they put there is one fewer dollar that they're going to put into building a submarine or a frigate or supporting their military in some way. So, yes, we should be concerned, but nonetheless, there's a lot of other things China's doing much more worrying.
Let's hear what Chen Pokong has to say. What is the biggest problem the Belt and Road Initiative poses for China?
There is a big risk for Chinese investment. According to the Belt and Road Initiative, China is investing a lot of money in the regions or countries where the politics is not stable and the security is weak. If conflicts, turmoils, and sudden changes occur, Chinese investment could turn into a huge loss. And all this loss will be the Chinese people's loss. But the Chinese people has no rights to prevent Chinese government from doing anything risky. This is absolutely unfair to Chinese people. Actually, the Belt and Road Plan now is facing a number of obstacles and failures. Not only the Western countries have cold shoulder to this plan, but also the countries which are close to China or friendly to China also has more and more suspicion and rejection to this plan. For example, Pakistan, Nepal, and Myanmar rejected some hydropower plants or dam projects funded by China because of local opposition. The reason is because Chinese government's asking price is too high. Sometimes they are demanding 90% of the profit, or because Chinese loan has a very tough and strict condition, or because these projects can harm the environment. So these projects are rejected or cancelled in these countries.
Coming up, how does the Belt and Road Initiative benefit the countries it's in? And does it help regular Chinese citizens or only elites?
The Belt and Road Initiative is financially risky for China and the countries involved. That is, if they can't pay back the debt. What are the benefits that outweigh these risks? How does China benefit if the countries can't pay back their debt? And what's in it for the average Chinese citizen? Let's take a look.
The countries taking part in China's Belt and Road Initiative have some obvious benefits. Many of the developing countries don't have the money to improve their infrastructure. China's loans allow them to build up infrastructure quickly. It could also give leverage against traditional regional powers, such as India in South Asia and Russia in Central Asia. But there are also many hidden disadvantages. These loans could be debt traps, opening countries up to more Chinese influence. One example of this is Sri Lanka's Hambantota port. The country couldn't pay back its debt to China. Instead, it gave China a 99-year lease on the port and a controlling equity stake. Jonathan Hillman is a fellow and director of Reconnecting Asia Project at the Center of Strategic and International Studies. He explained Sri Lanka's debt problem at a hearing on January 25, 2018.
Thank you. So Sri Lanka was just mentioned, and I think it's a fascinating case of both some of the rewards for China, even when things go wrong. And so, in the southern part of Sri Lanka, which I had an opportunity to visit just a few weeks ago, there's a port at Hambantota that we're probably all familiar with that was built, by Chinese contractors with Chinese financing. And then when the government couldn't pay back the loan, China took equity in the port. They now have a 99-year lease. And this is in a very strategic area of the world. It's, miles from some of the busiest shipping lanes. And if you go there today, it's, kind of on lockdown. It's been handed over to Chinese companies to run. But there's not a lot of economic activity there. And it's a dramatic contrast. It's like night and day between that port and the port in Colombo, where there's lots of, cargo vessels coming in and out. In Hambantota, you can look.
Just how will these problems work themselves out? Let's hear my discussion with Gordon Chang and Chen-Po Kong again. What happens if the countries China invested in can't pay back Chinese loans?
I think that we're going to see a couple things happen. First of all, China will have to convert some of that into equity. China will take some losses. China may get some military bases in places as sort of in payment for loans. We saw a little bit of this in Sri Lanka, for instance. But what China is going to do is basically end up stretching its finances too thin, largely because these projects, for the most part, are not economically viable. So there's going to be compromise, and China's going to take a little bit of a hit, maybe a big hit, on the places where Belt and Road has really fallen into hard times.
Finally, who does the Belt and Road Initiative benefit in the end? Here's what Chen-Po Kong has to say. What are the benefits of the BRI to average Chinese citizens? Is it like an economic stimulus package for China, or does it mostly benefit Chinese elites?
As we know, China is still an imbalanced country with big gap between the rich and the poor. What Chinese government should do is to invest more money on its own citizens. For example, there is a huge need of healthcare, education, sanitation, and retirement benefits, which so far has limited funding from Chinese government. What Chinese government is doing is to invest a lot of money abroad. Spending money, 大傻逼. This is a nickname that Chinese netizens gave to Chinese government. Regarding Belt and Road Initiative, if it is a stimulus package for Chinese economy, but Chinese people have no idea how it works, and Chinese people do not see or feel any advantages this plan has brought to China in the past 5 years. Actually, Belt and Road plan may hide a layer of intention of the CCP syndicate or red elites. That is, the senior Chinese official and red elites hope to find an outlet in international community for their enormous ill-gotten gains through the so-called overseas investment. So for some extent, this Belt and Road plan may be a disguised money laundering plan. This may be the most brilliant and secretive money laundering scheme in this world today. One of the latest evidences, Sun Zhencai, a former Politburo member and Chongqing's party chief, he accused corruption. One of his accusations is using the name of Belt and Road plan to provide government funds to his mistress, who is also a businesswoman.
China is the second largest economy in the world. No doubt it's powerful. However, is it wise for it to show itself as a superpower that could just break into other people's backyard without any concerns? The European Union, India, even Russia's reaction is a clear answer to that question. To sum up, the Belt and Road Initiative might make sense from a geopolitical point of view for China, but China is not quite ready for the scale and complexity of this effort. let alone the fact that the world does not trust China's motivation. Thanks for watching Zooming In. I'm Simone Gao, and see you next week.